When we think of Iran today, what comes to mind? Probably oil, revolution, stuff from the news headlines, right? But that's just scratching the surface. Underneath all that is this absolutely epic story, a history that goes back thousands of years. And honestly, if you want to understand the Iran of today, you have to understand its past. So let's do it. Let's trace that story from one of the world's very first empires all the way to the modern republic. It really makes you wonder, doesn't it? How does a civilization manage to survive millennia of empires, invasions, and massive revolutions, and not just survive, but actually thrive and still be a major player on the world stage? Well, that's what we're going to explore. We're going to follow this idea I like to call the unbreakable thread of Persian culture. It's this incredible force that's just woven its way through history, and believe me, it's still defining Iran's identity right now. All right, let's get into it. Our story kicks off way back, over 2,500 years ago, with what you could honestly call the world's first true superpower. This was an empire that literally wrote the playbook for centuries to come. Okay, so this gives us a quick look at the major players in early Persian history. First up, you've got Cyrus the Great. This guy is a legend. He's the one who united the tribes and created the massive Achaemenid Empire back in 550 BCE. Then, of course, you have the famous Greco-Persian Wars. You've probably heard of the 300 Spartans, right? That was against this empire. Eventually, it was Alexander the Great who came in and conquered Persia. But, and this is a huge but, even after that total collapse, the Persian spirit just didn't die. A few centuries later, the Sassanid Empire rises from the ashes, basically saying, "We're back," and ready to reclaim that old glory. Now, here's what made the Achaemenids so special. They weren't just about conquering, they were absolute geniuses when it came to running the place. Guys like Cyrus and Darius came up with a system called the satrap. Think of it like a network of states or provinces, each with its own governor called a satrap. This was a game changer. It allowed them to control this huge, incredibly diverse territory. I mean, we're talking from parts of Europe all the way to India. It was such a brilliant model for governance that even the Romans studied it and copied parts of it later on. And get this is a quote from the famous Cyrus Cylinder, which some people call the world's first charter of human rights. It's all about this policy of tolerance that was just revolutionary for the time. I mean, think about it. When Cyrus conquered Babylon, what did he do? He freed the enslaved peoples, including the Jewish people, and let them go home and worship their own gods. This wasn't just him being a nice guy, it was smart policy. This respect for different cultures was a key ingredient to keeping his massive empire stable. Okay, so after centuries of these incredible Persian empires, a huge change was on the horizon. A powerful new force was rising up from the Arabian Peninsula, and it was about to change the very soul of Persia, forever. So before Islam came along, the main religion in Persia was Zoroastrianism. It's actually one of the oldest monotheistic religions in the world. It really shaped how Persians saw everything. The whole idea was that the universe is this big cosmic battle between good and evil, light and darkness. And fire was a huge symbol for them. It represented purity and truth. It was so central to their worship that people sometimes called them fire worshippers. By the 600s, the Sassanid Empire was just worn out. They'd been fighting their rivals, the Byzantine Empire, for centuries, and it left them really weak. This was the moment. Arab armies, united under the new banner of Islam, just swept across the region. And the Sassanid dynasty fell. The change was massive and immediate. You had a new ruling class, a new main religion, and even a new language of government. This was the beginning of Persia's transformation into an Islamic land. Now, you might be thinking, okay, so that's it for the Persian story, right? Conquered. But what happened next is maybe the most amazing proof of that unbreakable thread we talked about. Persia was about to get hit by wave after wave of invaders, but this is where its incredible resilience really shines through. I mean, for almost 1,000 years, Persia was just a constant battleground. After the Arabs, you had Turkic groups like the Seljuks sweep in. Then in the 1200s, the big one, the Mongol hordes. Genghis Khan and his grandson Hulagu came through, and the devastation was just unimaginable. And even after all that, another conqueror, Timur or Tamerlane, showed up. It was relentless. But here's where the story takes a really weird and wonderful turn. Something incredible kept happening. These invaders would show up with their armies, conquer the land, and then they'd get completely absorbed by the culture. It's this great irony. They won the battle, but Persian culture won the war. They were militarily victorious, but culturally, they were the ones who got conquered. So how did this happen? Well, you can see it here. The invaders, especially the Turks and Mongols, started using the Persian language in their royal courts and for poetry. They realized the Persians had these super sophisticated ways of running a government, so they just adopted them. They started paying for incredible Persian art and architecture. And eventually, many of them, like a branch of the Mongols, even converted to Islam, the religion of the people they were ruling. In short, they became Persianized. They ended up becoming the new guardians of that unbreakable cultural thread. So, after all those centuries of being ruled by outsiders, Persia finally reemerges. A new homegrown dynasty comes to power, and they're going to forge a new identity, one that is so powerful and distinct that it separates Iran from many of its neighbors, even today. Okay, to really get this next part, and to get modern Iran, obviously, we need to talk about Shia Islam. So, after the Prophet Muhammad died, there was a big disagreement about who should lead the Muslim community. One group, the Shia, which comes from a phrase meaning partisans of Ali, believed leadership should have stayed in the Prophet's family, starting with his son-in-law, Ali. The other, larger group believed the leader should be chosen by the community. They became known as the Sunnis. This disagreement was the big split, and it divided the Islamic world. Fast forward to the early 1500s. A really charismatic leader named Ismail I comes along, founds the Safavid dynasty, and makes a decision that changes everything. He declares Shia Islam the official religion of the state. Now, this was a huge deal because most Persians back then were actually Sunni. This conversion was forced and it wasn't always pretty, but it worked. It created this unique Persian Shia identity that made the kingdom totally distinct from all the other big Muslim empires around it. And this new Shia identity immediately put the Safavids on a collision course with their biggest rival, the massive, powerful Sunni Ottoman Empire right next door. This wasn't just a political rivalry, it was a deep religious and ideological divide. For centuries, these two empires battled it out for control of places like modern-day Iraq. And that rivalry, believe it or not, helped draw the political and religious map of the Middle East that we still see today. Okay, so dynasties continued to come and go after the Safavids, but now we're going to jump ahead to the 20th century because the modern era brought a totally new kind of challenge. We're talking about a rapid and often pretty forceful collision with the West, and this collision would set the stage for one of the biggest events of the last 100 years. So, in 1925, this army officer, Reza Khan, takes power and starts the Pahlavi dynasty. He, and later his son, who would be the last Shah of Iran, had this huge project. They wanted to build a modern, secular, Western-style nation. A noble goal, maybe, but this created massive tension in a society that was deeply shaped by centuries of Shia tradition. And then you have these huge moments like the CIA-backed coup in 1953, which basically cemented the Shah's power and just made that divide between the monarchy and the people even deeper. Then, in the 1960s, the Shah kicks off his White Revolution, which basically put all these changes into overdrive. And look, on paper, a lot of it sounds pretty good. Reforming land ownership, giving women the right to vote, pushing for education. But the problem was, it was all forced from the top down. This really aggressive push for secularism, which was paid for by oil money, plus all the Western clothes and laws, it started to really alienate the powerful religious leaders and, honestly, a huge chunk of the regular traditional population. And all that discontent started to rally around one figure, an exiled cleric named Ayatollah Ruhollah Khomeini. His message hit home with all those people who felt like their culture and their values were being erased by the Shah. And this quote, wow, it perfectly captures his mindset. He's saying the Shah's government is illegal, period. He wasn't just asking for changes. He was declaring the whole system illegitimate and saying he was going to build a real Islamic government to replace it. So it really boiled down to two completely different visions for Iran's future. On one side, you have the Shah. He was looking backward to the glory of ancient pre-Islamic Persia and forward to the modern West. That was his model. On the other side, you have Khomeini and his followers. They were looking to Islam. For them, Iran's true identity was its Shia faith. So the Shah's secular laws and his close alliance with the US, to them, that was a complete betrayal. By 1979, things reached a boiling point. Massive protests just paralyzed the entire country. The Shah fled, and Ayatollah Khomeini returned from exile to these enormous crowds, a real hero's welcome. The revolution was, and I mean this, a seismic event. It completely shattered a monarchy that had lasted for 2,500 years and replaced it with something brand new, the Islamic Republic of Iran, a government run by religious authorities. So, from the very first Persian Empire all the way to today's Islamic Republic, what a journey. We've seen a civilization that was constantly shaped by conquest, but somehow it always ended up absorbing its conquerors. It's a culture that has gone through these huge religious and political shifts, And it all brings us back to that unbreakable thread of history and identity. For a nation defined by something so powerful, the big question is, what's the next chapter?